The Paradox of Becoming, the Buddha's Warning. Most people never hear. Part 1. The topic of becoming, although it features one major paradox, contains other paradoxes as well. Not the least of these is the fact that, although becoming is one of the most important concepts in the Buddha's teachings, there is no full-scale treatment of it in the English language. This book is an attempt to fill that lack. The importance of becoming is evident from the role it plays in the Four Noble Truths, particularly in the second. Suffering and stress are caused by any form of craving that leads to becoming. Thus, the end of suffering must involve the end of becoming. The central paradox of becoming is also evident in the second noble truth, where one of the three forms of craving leading to becoming is craving for non-becoming, the ending of what has come to be. This poses a practical challenge for any attempt to put an end to becoming. Many writers have tried to resolve this paradox by defining non-becoming in such a way that the desire for unbinding, nibbana, would not fall into that category. However, the Buddha himself taught a strategic resolution to this paradox, in which the fourth noble truth, the path to the end of suffering, involves creating a type of becoming where the mind is so steady and alert that it can simply allow what has come into being to pass away of its own accord, thus avoiding the twin dangers of craving for becoming or for non-becoming. My first inkling that the resolution of the paradox of becoming was strategic and paradoxical itself, rather than simply linguistic, came from reading the following passage in the autobiography of Fra Ajahn Lee. In this passage, Ajahn Lee is teaching meditation to a senior scholarly monk in Bangkok. One day the Sumded said, "There's one thing I'm still doubtful about. To make the mind still and bring it down to its basic resting level, bhavanga. Isn't this the essence of becoming and birth?" "That's what concentration is," I told him, "becoming and birth." But the Dhamma we're taught to practice is for the sake of doing away with becoming and birth. So what are we doing giving rise to more becoming and birth? If you don't make the mind take on becoming, it won't give rise to knowledge, because knowledge has to come from becoming if it's going to do away with becoming. Each desire creates a world, and the way out is another becoming. We live in the same world, but in different worlds. The differences come partly from our living in different places. If you live to the east of a mountain and I to the west, my world will have a mountain blocking its sunrises and yours its sunsets. But, depending on what we want out of the world, our worlds can also differ even when we stand in the same place. A painter, a skier, and a miner looking at a mountain from the same side will see different mountains. Our worlds are also different in the sense that each person can move from one world to another, sometimes very quickly, over time. If you're a painter, a skier, and a miner, you will see the same mountain in different ways depending on what you want from it at any given moment: beauty, adventure, or wealth. Even if you stay focused on nothing but the desire to paint, the beauty you want from the mountain will change with time, sometimes over years, sometimes from one moment to the next. Your identity as a painter will continue to evolve. Each and every desire, in fact, has its own separate world, and within those worlds, we take on different identities. The Buddha had a word for this experience of an identity inhabiting a world defined around a specific desire. He called it Bhava, which is related to the verb bhavati, to be or to become. He was especially interested in Bhava as process, how it comes about and how it can be ended. So, becoming is probably a better English rendering for the term than being or existence, especially as it follows on doing, rather than existing as a prior metaphysical absolute or ground. In other words, it's not the source from which we come. It's something produced by the activity of our minds. The Buddha's analysis of becoming as process throws a great deal of light on how imaginary, fictional, or dream worlds are created, but that was not his main concern. He was more interested in seeing how the process of becoming relates to the way suffering and stress are brought about and how they can be brought to an end. One of his first discoveries in analyzing the relationship between becoming and suffering was that the processes of becoming operate on different scales in space and time. The process by which the mind creates a psychological sense of location for itself in states of becoming within this lifetime is the same process by which it establishes a location for itself in another world after death. The question of whether death was followed by rebirth was hotly debated in the Buddha's time, so in teaching the fact of rebirth, he was not simply parroting the assumptions of his culture. The experience of his awakening is what gave him proof that becoming has both psychological and cosmological dimensions, within the moment and stretching over lifetimes, with a parallel pattern in each. You can learn how the mind finds a place for rebirth by watching how it moves from one becoming to another here and now. The Buddha's awakening also taught him that the craving and clinging leading to stress are identical to the craving and clinging that lead to becoming. So becoming is inevitably stressful. This explains why the typical human way of avoiding suffering, which is to replace one state of becoming with another, can never fully succeed. If to escape the sufferings of being a painter, you decide to become a miner instead, you simply exchange one set of sufferings for another. Regardless of what identity you take on, or however you experience the mountain of the world, it's going to entail some degree of stress. Thus, to put an end to suffering, it's necessary to put an end to becoming. And to do that, it's necessary to understand the process that gives rise to becoming, so that the problem can be attacked at its cause. This is why the Buddha focused on becoming as process. And he found that the process has three components, which he likened to the act of planting a seed in a field. The field stands for the range of possibilities offered by past and present karma. The seed stands for consciousness, together with other karmic factors that nourish it. The water moistening the seed represents the present mental act of craving and clinging, which fixes on a specific spot in the range of possibilities offered by the field, allowing becoming to develop from the potentials offered by the seed. This is where the Buddha ran into the central paradox of becoming, because the craving and clinging that provide the moisture do not have to delight in the field or the resultant becoming in order to bear fruit. If the mind fastens on a particular set of possibilities with the aim of changing or obliterating them, that acts as moisture for a state of becoming as well. Thus, the desire to put an end to becoming produces a new state of becoming. Because any desire that produces becoming also produces suffering, the Buddha was faced with a strategic challenge: how to put an end to suffering when the desire to put an end to suffering would lead to renewed suffering. His solution to this problem involved a paradoxical strategy, creating a state of becoming in the mind from which he could watch the potentials of karma as they come into being, but without fueling the desire to do anything with regard to those potentials at all. In the terms of the field analogy, this solution would deprive the seed of moisture. Eventually, when all other states of becoming had been allowed to pass away, the state of becoming that had acted as the strategic vantage point would have to be deprived of moisture as well. Because the moisture of craving and clinging would have seeped into the seed even of this strategic becoming, this would eventually mean the destruction of the seed, as that moisture and any conditioned aspects of consciousness the seed might contain were allowed to pass away. But any unconditioned aspects of consciousness, if they existed, wouldn't be touched at all. This is precisely what the Buddha attempted, and he found that the strategy worked. Becoming could be allowed to end through creating a specific state of becoming, the condition of mental absorption known as jhāna, watered by specific types of craving and clinging. This type of becoming, together with its appropriate causes, is what constitutes the path he later taught. Once the path had done its work, he found, it could be abandoned through a process of perceptual deconstruction, and the quest for the end of suffering would be complete. Freed from both suffering and becoming, the mind would be totally released from the limitations of any identity or location, a freedom that beggars the imagination, but captures it as well. 2 stories. In his first sermon, the Buddha begins his definition of the cause of stress and suffering with the phrase, "the craving that leads to renewed bhava." He ends his description of the fruits of his awakening with the realization, "there is now no renewed bhava." These 2 statements show clearly that the concept of bhava is central to an understanding of suffering, its cause, and its cessation. And as we will see, it also plays a crucial role in the path to the cessation of stress and suffering. This means that it is central to all 4 of the 4 noble truths, truths lying at the heart of the Buddha's teaching as a whole. Yet the Buddha never gives an essential definition of what the word bhava means, so an understanding has to be pieced together from the way he uses it in his teachings. Any Pali dictionary will show that bhava is related to the verb bhavati, which means to be or to become. This is why bhava is often translated as being or becoming. But to see what kind of being or becoming is meant by the word, we have to look at it in context. Bhava is included in a variety of lists describing mental states that an arahant, a fully awakened person, has overcome. Thus, it is one of the 3 asavas, or effluents, one of the 4 ogas, or floods, one of the 4 yogas, or burdens, and one of the 7 anusayas, or obsessions. Although it does not occur in the standard list of 10 sanyojanas, or fetters, a standard formula describing the arahant states that she has destroyed the fetter of becoming. Although these lists clearly indicate that bhava is regarded as something negative that has to be overcome for the sake of awakening, they give no idea of what the term actually means. For that, we have to look at a passage describing bhava in action, and the primary teaching supplying this context is dependent co-arising, the Buddha's most complete description of the factors leading to suffering and stress. See Appendix 1. There, bhava is conditioned by craving and clinging. It acts as a condition for birth, which is followed by aging, illness, and death. 2 points stand out here. First, bhava is not being in the sense of a primary metaphysical absolute. Instead, it is part of an ongoing dynamic process, something produced repeatedly in a complex network of cause and effect, what Sin 312 calls the stream of bhava. It's a type of being that follows on doing, a doing in anticipation of what will become. For this reason, in choosing an English equivalent for bhava, becoming seems more appropriate than being, in that it better captures bhava's conditioned, purposeful, dynamic nature. Second, becoming acts as a transition point between 2 contexts in the stream of conditions leading to suffering. It is conditioned by such purely psychological factors as craving and clinging, and yet it provides the locus for processes that occur both on the psychological and cosmological level: birth, aging, illness, and death. In fact, one of the distinctive features of the Buddha's use of the notion of becoming is the ease with which he shifts the context of the term from the cosmological to the psychological and back. The reasons for this dual context are illustrated by 2 incidents from his accounts of how the cosmos evolves. Although the Buddha famously said, SN 2286, that all he taught was suffering and the end of suffering, the Pali discourses occasionally portray him as using cosmological accounts to illustrate the underlying psychology of how suffering comes about and how it can be brought to an end. The accounts differ in their details, but the differences can be explained by the fact that the Buddha nowhere gives a master narrative on the origin of the cosmos. He always depicts the cosmos as a work in progress, showing how it develops not from the decisions of a single creator, but from the independent decisions of all the beings inhabiting it. Thus, he is free to choose from many diverse, sometimes simultaneous, storylines to teach different lessons. Still, his accounts share a common framework. The cosmos goes through repeated cycles of evolution or expansion and devolution or contraction. The dual nature of becoming, both psychological and cosmological, appears clearly in two accounts that focus on how, after a period of contraction, the cosmos begins to evolve again. The birth of a creator, a story of mistaken becoming. The first account, told to explain how the idea of a creator God was first conceived, illustrates the change in becoming that occurs when a being leaves one level of the cosmos and reappears in another. There ultimately comes a time when, with the passing of a long stretch of time, this world devolves. When the world is devolving, beings for the most part head toward the radiant, Brahmas. There they stay, mind-made, feeding on rapture, self-luminous, coursing through the air, established in beauty for a long stretch of time. Then there ultimately comes a time when, with the passing of a long stretch of time, this world evolves. When the world is evolving, an empty Brahma palace appears. Then a certain being, from the exhaustion of his lifespan or the exhaustion of his merit, falls from the company of the radiant and re-arises in the empty Brahma palace. And there he still stays mind-made, feeding on rapture, self-luminous, coursing through the air, established in beauty for a long stretch of time. After dwelling there alone for a long time, he experiences displeasure and agitation. Oh, if only other beings would come to this world. Then other beings, through the ending of their lifespan or the ending of their merit, fall from the company of the radiant and reappear in the Brahma palace, in the company of that being. And there they still stay mind-made, feeding on rapture, self-luminous, coursing through the air, established in beauty for a long stretch of time. Then the thought occurred to the being who reappeared first, I am Brahma, the great Brahma, the conqueror, the unconquered, the all-seeing, all-powerful, the sovereign Lord, the maker, creator, chief, appointer, and ruler, Father of all that have been and shall be. These beings were created by me. Why is that? First the thought occurred to me, oh, if only other beings would come to this world. And thus my direction of will brought these beings to this world. As for the beings who reappeared later, this thought occurred to them. This is Brahma, Father of all that have been and shall be. We were created by this Brahma. Why is that? We saw that he appeared here before, while we appeared after. The being who reappeared first was of longer lifespan, more beautiful and more influential, while the beings who reappeared later were of shorter lifespan, less beautiful, and less influential. DN 1. Here, a change in becoming happens because of the exhaustion of old karma. In this case, the meritorious karma that kept these beings in the company of the radiant. However, present karma also plays a role in the shift from one lifetime to the next, in that one must cling to craving to make the shift. When a being sets this body aside and has not yet attained another body, I say that it is craving sustained. Craving vaksha is its sustenance at that time. SN 44-9. In addition, a change in becoming also occurs after the new lifetime has begun. The mistaken perception that the great Brahma is a creator God, even though it does not change the physical details of the cosmos, does change the way he and the other beings experience the nature of the cosmos and their relationship to one another. This change in relationship will apparently continue as long as the eon lasts. In this way, Even though the change in becoming is more psychological than physical, its impact is no less lasting and strong. The second cosmological account, however, describes how a change in becoming within the context of a single lifetime can actually alter the physical universe. This account, which carries allegorical overtones, was told to refute the racial pride of the Brahmins, showing how racial pride, rather than any supposed racial inferiority in others, was what brought about the degeneration of the world. There ultimately comes a time when, with the passing of a long stretch of time, this world devolves. When the world is devolving, beings for the most part head toward the radiant, Brahmas. There they stay, mind-made, feeding on rapture, self-luminous, coursing through the air, established in beauty for a long stretch of time. Then there ultimately comes a time when, with the passing of a long stretch of time, this world evolves. When the world is evolving, beings for the most part falling from the company of the radiant come to this world. But they still stay mind-made, feeding on rapture, self-luminous, coursing through the air, established in beauty for a long stretch of time. And at that time there is just a single mass of water, a blinding darkness. No sun and moon are discernible, no asterisms or constellations, no day or night, no months or fortnights, no seasons or years, no male or female. Beings are reckoned simply as beings. Then ultimately, with the passing of a long stretch of time, a flavor earth appeared on the water around those beings, just like the skin that appears on top of hot milk as it cools. It was consummate in color, consummate in aroma, consummate in flavor. Just like consummate ghee, consummate butter, such was its color. Just like pure wild honey, such was its taste. Then a certain being of wanton nature, thinking, "Now what might this be?" tasted the flavor earth with his finger. On tasting the flavor earth with his finger, he became enamored and his craving alighted. Then other beings, following his example, tasted the flavor earth with their fingers. On tasting the flavor earth with their fingers, they became enamored and their craving alighted. So those beings attacked the flavor earth, tearing it to pieces with their hands to eat it. When they attacked the flavor earth, tearing it to pieces with their hands to eat it, their self-luminosity vanished. With the vanishing of their self-luminosity, the sun and moon appeared. With the appearing of the sun and moon, the asterisms and constellations appeared. With the appearing of the asterisms and constellations, day and night appeared. With the appearing of day and night, seasons and years appeared. And to this extent did this world evolve again. Then those beings, eating the flavor earth, stayed for a long stretch of time with that as their food, with that as their nourishment. As they kept eating the flavor earth, a coarseness grew in their bodies, and good and bad coloring were discernible. Some of them were endowed with good color, some with bad. At that point, those of a good color grew haughty toward those of a bad color. We are of a better coloring, those are of a worse. Because of the color haughtiness of those of a prideful and haughty nature, the flavor earth disappeared. DN 27. In this account, present karma plays a predominant role in the change of becoming. As craving acquires a focus, this seems to be the meaning of craving alights. Beings act on it. In acting on it, they themselves immediately change, and as they change, their experience of the world around them changes as well. There is a familiar psychological truth here. People who have recovered from an addiction will recognize how their sense of themselves changed when the addiction began, how their perception of the world was also distorted while the addiction lasted, and how both they and the world around them changed when the addiction was finally overcome. If the addiction was for alcohol, they found themselves defined by the desire for alcohol, and the world around them defined by, and limited to, its ability or inability to provide them with the alcohol needed to satisfy that desire. Only when the addiction was overcome were they freed from those limitations. They are now different people, and the world a different place. This connection between one's personal state and one's experience of the world, and the way in which both depend on the focal point of one's cravings, goes a long way toward explaining the combination of psychology and cosmology in the Buddha's concept of becoming. And although the cosmological passages depicting this connection are marked by a sly humor, the basic outlines of the picture they provide are confirmed by other discourses that treat the topic of becoming in more detail and earnestness. As that outline shows, becoming constitutes a sense of self-identity located in a particular world. The contours of that self and that world are determined by a combination of old karma and new. Their location is determined by an act of craving and desire. Passages discussing the issue of becoming in more detail, to be discussed in the following chapter, will show why this particular combination of elements necessarily leads to suffering. They will also show how these elements open a path to the end of suffering, and yet require that that path take several paradoxical turns.